"Is this real?" shouted someone from the audience, their voice echoing through every corner of the studio. Johnny Carson and Jim Carrey looked at each other, both their faces pale white. The plan had completely spiraled out of control. Fake ambulance had become real. Ambulance. Actor police had become real. Police. The man on the stretcher was motionless, and no one knew whether he was an actor or genuinely injured. And now both of them had to explain to 15 million viewers, live on air. This was just a prank, wasn't it? November 13th, 1985, Wednesday afternoon. In Johnny Carson's corner office on the 6th floor of NBC Studios in Burbank, Los Angeles, a historic conversation was taking place. Jim Carrey, a 23-year-old young comedian, sat across from Carson's desk, constantly rubbing his hands together. He was preparing to propose the biggest risk of his career. The office was like a museum of Carson's 23-year career. Photos with Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Bob Hope hung on the walls. Emmy Awards thank you plaques. On his desk sat a half-finished coffee cup, stacks of paper filled with notes, and those famous Carson glasses. "Johnny," said Jim with a slight tremor in his voice, "I'm going to propose a crazy idea to you. What if we did a hidden camera prank on live TV?" Carson removed his glasses, leaned back, that characteristic Carson look, the look with which he had evaluated thousands of guests. "What kind of prank, Jim?" Jim leaned forward, excitement visible in his eyes. "Think about it, Johnny. For 23 years, everything's been planned. Questions written, answers predictable. But what if just once, no one knew what would happen, including you?" "Go on," said Carson, his fingers starting to drum on the desk. "I'll fool you. You'll fool me, then we'll fool the audience. But we'll fool them so well that no one, absolutely no one, will know what's real and what's fake. We'll completely blur the lines between reality and prank on live television." He was 60 years old, but Jim's proposal had awakened the youth within him. Interesting, very interesting. But the truly shocking thing was how much this idea excited Carson and how it awakened his old rebellious spirit. Over the next 2 days, the plan was detailed. Carson's assistant, Doc Severinsen, was also included. In Conference Room 3, NBC's most secret meeting room, the framework of the operation was drawn. "Here's the team," said Carson, pointing to the files on the desk. "Tom Mitchell and Mike Reynolds will be fake security guards. Both are professional stuntmen, used to pranking. Robert Kim and Linda Martinez, fake paramedics. Both are real paramedics but do acting as a side job." As Jim examined the fake blood capsules, he noticed his hands were shaking. "Is this safe, Johnny? We got it from Hollywood's best theater makeup expert, Frank Carlucci. It's been used on Broadway for years. Completely harmless." Doc Severinsen explained the details of the plan. "Jim, you're going to act like you're losing control. Tom will intervene. You'll push Tom lightly. Tom will act like he's injured, bite the blood capsule and fall to the ground. Then fake paramedics will come, say the situation is critical, and try to take him away. At that point, you and Johnny will reveal it was a prank." Carson handed Jim a small note. "Our code words, real art, and take off the masks. If things get out of control, if you go off script, use these words. I'll intervene." "But what if it really gets out of control?" asked Jim. "That's what makes this exciting. It's spontaneous." On the morning of the show, Jim had woken up at 6. Actually, he hadn't slept at all. While sitting in Los Angeles traffic on his way from his apartment to NBC, 1,000 scenarios ran through his mind. What if things went wrong? What if NBC management found out? What if sponsors fled? When he arrived at the studio at 4:02 p.m., his hands were sweaty. Security guard Mike recognized him. "Hey Jim, big day today, right? First time on The Tonight Show." "Yes, Mike," said Jim, trying to hide the nervousness in his voice. "Big day." He went over the plan one last time with Carson. Every detail was discussed. Tom and Mike came and rehearsed their positions. "Are you ready?" asked Carson, with both excitement and worry in his eyes. "I don't know, Johnny. I've honestly never felt like this." "Have you ever felt like this in 23 years? Carson looked out the window at the Los Angeles landscape. Never, Jim. This will either be the most amazing moment in television history, or the disaster that ends both our careers. Tom and Mike wore fake NBC security uniforms. Robert and Linda wore real paramedic uniforms. The ambulance was ready at the back door. Remember, Doc said to everyone, this is a big risk. If we make the slightest mistake, we could all lose our job. This is exactly when everything would start to change, and no one could predict how that night would change television history. 11:20 p.m. countdown began. Backstage, Jim was pacing back and forth. His heart was beating 140 times per minute. His hands were shaking. Carson was making his final preparations on stage, but he was nervous too. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, live. The red light came on. 15 million people were watching on television. Carson came out with his usual energy. His monologue was perfect. The audience laughed, but there was a different sparkle in his eyes. Tonight we have a really special guest, folks, said Carson, turning to the camera. Young, talented, said to be a bit crazy. From Los Angeles, Jim Carrey. Here's Jim. Ed McMahon's legendary voice. Jim came out with different energy. He ran on stage. When he shook hands with Carson, he hugged him tightly. Johnny, being here is incredible. Is this real? The first 10 minutes were normal conversation. Jim talked about where he was from, his comedy career, but he was becoming increasingly energetic. Jim, said Carson, watching you it's like there's tremendous energy waiting to explode inside you. You're absolutely right, Johnny. Actually, tonight I want to share something very special with you. They say Jim Carrey isn't real, he just does characters, but tonight I'm going to show them the real Jim Carrey. And Jim climbed onto Carson's desk. Television is artificial, Johnny. Everything is pre-written. Real art is spontaneous. Jim jumped down from the desk, but something unplanned happened. Carson's coffee cup was at the edge of the desk. It should normally have been in the center. Jim's foot hit the cup. Clank. The cup flew. Hot coffee spilled on Carson's white shirt. It was 80 degrees hot. Carson really screamed. This was not part of the plan at all. Jim panicked. Johnny, are you hurt? The coffee was too hot. Carson was holding his shirt. Adrenaline spread through Jim's body. There was no plan anymore. Jim was losing control and diving into the audience. Wait a minute, don't miss this detail. Because the adrenaline rush Jim experienced at that moment would take him completely off script. People need to see the truth, Jim shouted. This was never planned. He approached an elderly woman in the front row. Ma'am, what's the biggest lie in your life? Margaret Thompson, 62 years old, was shocked. That's a very rude question. Rude? This is real life, Margaret. Millions of people are watching. Have you ever lied to your husband? Carson intervened on stage. Jim, I think you should come back. But Jim got very close to Carson, close enough to feel his breath. Johnny, you have secrets too. You've been sitting behind this desk for 23 years. Have you ever worn mask? Carson heard the code word. Jim was going off script. Jim suddenly grabbed Carson's tie. This was definitely not part of the plan. Carson's eyes widened. Jim, Carson was genuinely scared. Tom and Mike ran onto the stage. Sir, please calm down. Jim saw Tom but was now at the peak of adrenaline. He pushed Tom very hard. Tom lost his balance. Normally he would have been prepared, but Jim's push was much harder than planned. His left foot got caught in the pile of cables at the edge of the stage. Camera cables, power cables, sound equipment cables. Body weight shifted backward. Tom stretched out his hands for balance, but couldn't find anything to hold on to. There was a metal table at the edge of the stage for Carson's extra materials. Height 80 centimeters, sharp corners, with water glasses and notes on. As Tom fell backward, the back of his head, right at the parietal bone area, hit the sharp corner of the table. Clank, real metal sound, bone meeting metal. When Tom's head hit the table shook. Everything on it spilled to the floor. Tom immediately fell to the ground. His body went limp. His eyes closed, and blood started coming from his head. Real blood, dark red, sticky, metallic smelling. Jim froze, looking at Tom. Tom! This wasn't fake blood. It was real. Even the smell was different. Tom! Mike ran to his friend, fell to his knees. He checked his pulse. He has a pulse, but very weak. He's unconscious. Carson dropped the microphone. This wasn't part of the plan. The audience started standing up. Some were shouting. Some were watching in shock. "Is this real?" shouted a middle-aged man from the audience. The panic in his voice filled the entire studio. And at that moment, the doors opened. But it wasn't the fake paramedics coming. Real paramedics. From the Los Angeles Fire Department. Because someone in the audience had called real. "Where's the injured person?" shouted paramedic Daniel Rodriguez. Robert and Linda, the fake paramedics, were in shock backstage. Tom was really injured. This was no longer a prank. "What do we do?" Linda whispered. "I don't know, but we have to get out of here. If they see us, we'll be charged with impersonating paramedics." Both of them quickly left the studio. Real paramedics examined Tom. "Head trauma. He needs to be taken to the hospital." Tom was put on a stretcher, unconscious. Jim watched, his face pale white. The doors opened again. 2 Los Angeles police officers entered. "Who committed the assault?" asked the tall policeman Steve Martinez. The audience pointed to Jim. "That young man. Are you Jim Carrey?" John Thompson approached. "Yes." Jim's voice was barely audible. "You're under arrest for assault." Jim was shocked, but this was a prank. Steve checked Tom's identification. "Tom Mitchell, profession, stuntman." "This man is not a real security guard." "What do you mean?" Carson was shocked. "Why are you employing fake security, John?" Carson intervened. "Officer, this is my show. We were doing a hidden camera prank, but it got out of control. Is the injury fake too?" "No," Jim said sadly. "The injury is real. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet." Because at that moment, the unexpected was about to happen. Tom started moving on the stretcher. His eyes slowly opened. "Ah, my head hurts so much. What happened, guys?" Everyone turned to Tom. Jim ran to his side. "Tom, how are you?" "I'm so sorry." Tom tried to sit up on the stretcher. He had a bandage on his head, but his consciousness had returned. "Jim, is the prank still going on? Because everyone looks very serious." Carson laughed, but like he was having a nervous breakdown. "Tom, the prank is over, officially over." "Wow." Tom looked around. Real paramedics. Real police. Worried audience. This got much bigger than planned. "Paramedic Daniel, you need to go to the hospital for concussion check." "Okay, doctor." But was the prank successful? The entire studio, audience, technical crew, police, paramedics, started laughing. The tension had suddenly dissolved. Carson turned to the microphone. "There you have it, folks. You just witnessed the fine line between reality and prank, and none of us, including myself, knew what was real and what was fake." After the broadcast ended, Carson and Jim sat backstage. Both were still under the influence of adrenaline. Jim shaking. "What did we just experience?" "I don't know, Jim. I've never experienced anything like this in 23 years. This was 1,000 times different than I expected." NBC executives were holding emergency meetings. The legal department was on alert. Phone operators were working frantically. Producer Michael Zanola came running. "Johnny, what was that? We almost witnessed murder on live TV. Millions of people thought it was real. The FCC could shut us down." Jenny Kowalski, phone operator. "Guys, we're getting 85 calls per minute. The lines are jammed." "What are they saying?" Carson asked. "Everything. Half are very angry. This was disgraceful. Fire Carson." "Half are in shock. Was this real?" "And half are excited. Best show ever." Jim laughed. "Three halves, Jenny." "Exactly. Because nobody knows how to feel." At 1:30 a.m., Tom returned from the hospital. Big bandage on his head. "Doctor says my head is fine. 5-stitch cut. No concussion." Jim hugged Tom. "Tom, forgive me if you can. I couldn't control myself." "Jim, I'm a stuntman, but I didn't expect you to be this realistic. You won't believe it." But the media reaction was about to get even bigger. The next morning, November 16, 1985, Jim had woken up at 6. Actually, he hadn't slept at all. He went out of his apartment and ran to the nearest newsstand. In the cool Los Angeles morning air, he was wearing just a coat over his pajamas. Los Angeles Times. Big headline. Carson and Carrey change television history. Subtitle: 15 million viewers witness historic night where reality and prank mix. Complaint calls pouring into NBC. When he opened the newspaper, there was a full-page analysis.
Jim Carrey's performance last night is being seen not just as comedy, but as social experiment. UCLA media expert Sarah Mitchell, this could be the critical moment that questions the television audience's trust in media. The New York Times analysis article, New Era in TV, Reality and Fiction Mixed. America's longest-running talk show experienced an unprecedented event, unseen incident in Carson's 23-year career. The Times had a full-page interview. An article titled, "How Reliable Is Television Anymore?" included opinions from media ethics experts. USA Today, Jim Carrey, crazy genius or dangerous youth? Carson experienced the most controversial night of his 23-year career. Ratings broke historic records. Washington Post, editorial, "New Dimension in Television Art." Critics, "Could be the beginning of postmodern TV. The boundaries between reality and fiction are now ambiguous." Chicago Tribune, "Prank or real? Nobody knows." Post-event public survey: 34% say completely fake, 28% say partially real, 38% say no idea. As Jim read the newspapers, his hands were shaking, sweating. When the phone rang, he almost dropped it. His manager Betty Kowalski, with both excitement and fear in her voice, "Are you crazy? The whole country is talking about you. The phone has been ringing non-stop for 3 hours." "In a good way, Betty?" "Mixed, honey, very mixed. David Letterman invited you to his show. Oprah too. Saturday Night Live too. They also invited Johnny Carson." But at the same time, some conservative groups complained to NBC, wrote letters to the FCC. Some advertisers are worried. CNN broadcast special news bulletin that night, at 2:00 a.m. An unprecedented night occurred in television history. On The Tonight Show, a young comedian named Jim Carrey virtually hijacked the program. Even Johnny Carson lost control. Real police and paramedics intervened. What does this event mean? News anchor Margaret Thompson continued live. Experts say this event could change the future of television broadcasting. It could be the beginning of a new genre called reality TV. What can viewers trust anymore? ABC World News Tonight. Ted Koppel. Tonight Carson and Carrey presented an unprecedented show where audiences couldn't distinguish what was real and what was fake. Even the Los Angeles police were fooled. Is this a new dimension of media manipulation? CBS Evening News. Dan Rather. Complaints to NBC are increasing. Parents say children should not watch such violent scenes. But here's the paradox. Ratings are at the highest level of the season. America is giving contradictory reaction. NBC Nightly News. Approached objectively despite being their own channel. The Tonight Show's most controversial night was experienced. Whether Jim Carrey's performance was intentional or out of control is still unclear. NBC management will make a statement tomorrow. Detailed analyses from critics. The Hollywood Reporter James Patterson wrote a full-page analysis. What Carson and Carrey did may have created a new genre on television. We can call this meta-reality show. They blurred the boundaries between fiction and reality, so much that viewers don't know what to believe. This is the practical application of McLuhan's cool media theory. Variety. David Chen's column. Jim Carrey's performance is either pure genius or dangerous madness, maybe both. Television has never taken such a risk. This could be a new template for the Adam Sandler generation. Entertainment Weekly. What happened tonight was by no means coincidence. Carson and Carrey deliberately deceived the audience. The question is this art or manipulation? If this is art, where are the ethical boundaries? Rolling Stone. Matt Richardson. Rock and roll television. Carson did punk rock at 6. Jim Carrey is the new generation performance artist. If Andy Warhol were alive, he would applaud. People magazine. Who is Jim Carrey? Where did this 23-year-old young man come from? When we researched his background, Canadian origin, stand-up comedy background, but never performed such a radical performance. Academic comments from television experts. Robert Thompson, Syracuse University media expert, live on CNN. Carson and Carrey broke the fourth wall on television, the concept we know from theater, the invisible barrier between actor and audience. Now the viewer doesn't know what they're watching. This could be the beginning of postmodern media. Profs. Linda Hutchin, University of Toronto, on CBC. This is the postmodern turning point in television history. Reality and fiction can no longer be distinguished. The first television example of Jean Baudrillard's simulacra theory. Reality can no longer be distinguished from simulated reality. Dr. Susan Davis, UCLA Communication faculty, on NBC. Such experiments can be dangerous. The viewer becomes unable to know what to trust, very critical in terms of media literacy. Hundreds of letters came to NBC that week. Dear NBC, my 8-year-old son Leo loves Jim Carrey now. He's been imitating that young man constantly since last night. What a brave artist. Please give him his own show. With love, Kansas, Mary Johnson. To NBC management, what happened tonight was a complete disgrace. Johnny Carson allowing such immoral things is shameful. As a loyal viewer for 23 years, I watched The Tonight Show, but I will never watch it again. I need to protect my children from such violent content. Robert Williams, Dallas, Texas. Hello NBC. I've been watching Johnny Carson for 23 years. Last night was the most exciting TV experience of my life. Finally, we saw something spontaneous and unpredictable on television. Please let there be more. Patricia Davis, Brooklyn, New York. To NBC, we couldn't understand whether this was fake or real, but it was very impressive and thought-provoking. Television should always be like this, not predictable but surprising. Michael Rodriguez, San Francisco, California. This is television history's watershed moment. Barbara Walters, interview, time, be the cover, not just this season's, but the highest episode of the last 5 seasons, 42% share. Normal Tonight Show gets 18 to 20. Jim was shocked. Is this good? Fantastic. Jim, we're giving you your own monthly segment. What you're seeing now is nothing, because no one could predict the long-term effects of this event yet. Conclusion and historical legacy. In the years following that night, television was never the same. The concept of reality TV was born that night. Watching real people's unpredictable reactions became popular. MTV's Real World, later Survivor, Big Brother, The Apprentice, all carry the DNA of that night. Jim Carrey became a star. In the 1990s, he became a superstar with Ace Ventura, The Mask, Dumb and Dumber. Oscar nomination in 1998, with The Truman Show, but none felt as real as that night. When Carson retired from The Tonight Show in 1992, he invited Jim as a special guest on his final show. Jim, said Carson, sitting behind that desk for the last time, you scared me that night. Scared you? I scared myself, Johnny. But you were right. Real art comes from losing control. That night we both took off our masks, and maybe that's why it's never forgotten. And at that moment, something happened that no one predicted. This story was about to completely transform the television industry. Tom Mitchell continued his stunt career. He became famous in Hollywood as the Carson Accident. Doc Severinsen continued his music career, but always told about that night as the most exciting night of my life. When Johnny Carson died at age 79 in 2005, Jim Carrey spoke at the funeral. Johnny taught me the greatest lesson that night. The greatest performances are not planned, they are lived. When you face your fears, your true self emerges. We both learned this on that night, and television was never the same again. Even today, television historians refer to that night as the moment when modern reality TV was born. Was this story real? Was it fake? Nobody knows anymore, and maybe that's why it's perfect.
This story has come to an end, but the legacy Johnny Carson left behind will continue to live on in our hearts. If you'd like to keep the memories of characters like him alive through similar stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed this video, you'll help Johnny Carson's story reach even more people.